All right, hey, what's up? It's Andrew. We're gonna take a look at a Uldaman. I guess it was only a +9 that I did the other night. Tyrannical healing situation. So yeah, I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about how I approached healing the bosses in this. And yeah, I'm not quite sure if this is gonna lean more towards kind of like generic healing, boss healing advice in dungeons, or maybe a little more specific to this one in particular. But either way. It should be pretty interesting. So yeah, Uldaman, obviously we got 3 bosses. The tank in this run just like was an absolute maniac and pulled so much stuff at the beginning. You can look at the all the different casts going off here, or all these. This is like tracking the cooldowns actually of things. So yeah, somehow we actually did survive this. I don't know. I was just literally just ripping everything basically on cooldown. You can see I've got trees out. Anyway, this isn't about healing trash. So we're going to go ahead and skip ahead to the first boss, which is going to be very soon. Okay, so real quick, let's talk about what matters for healing these encounters. So there's sort of 2 things you need to know ahead of time. Number 1 is how does your class or your spec handle healing, mass amounts of damage. So for Resto Druid, we have a few different options. We have Flourish, which increases the duration and then the rate at which your hots that are currently out are healing. You've got Convoke, which is just kind of like a sort of a generic, just like throw out a bunch of heals, and hopefully that's good enough. Usually it's good enough. You also have some other stuff to consider, such as the broccoli procs. So every 3 times, if you have this talented, of course, every 3 times you press Swiftmend, the 3rd time will shift you into a 10-second incarnation, which gives you obviously a huge burst of healing, turns your regrowth instant cast, and just kind of juices up everything you're doing. You also have just kind of like healing from your trees. Every time you press a tree, it casts a Swiftmend, starts casting Nourish. There's also an instant regrowth, or not regrowth, instant wild growth. That's an AoE heal that goes out to everybody. None of these things are being tracked on my raid frames or anything, but it's important to know that you have access to all those things. So with that in mind, the next thing you have to consider is what are the healing checks during the encounter. So the main one for the first boss here, well, technically it's the second boss of the dungeon, the first one we're doing, Bromach, is the Quaking Totems. So I think it's about every 30 seconds. We'll see once we get into the fight. The boss is going to spawn these totems that need to be DPS down because every second they're out, they're just pulsing a bunch of AoE damage. So I know that going into this, which means that my number 1 job during this encounter is making sure we're prepped and ready to heal the damage that happens during those totems. So I'm going to go ahead and start playing the encounter a little bit. I'll start taking a look at a couple things. So first of all, Quaking Totem is being tracked over here, and which is lovely, we can't actually see the timer on it because I haven't set up my UI very well, or more accurately, I just don't look at this stuff on the right very often. Okay, but you'll see now it's popped up down here in the bottom. That means there's 10 seconds left until the event's going to happen. So what I'm thinking here, I'm looking at what I've got. So we've got Flourish. We've got Swiftmend Regrowth. Sorry, I keep calling it Regrowth. Swiftmend Wild Growth. So that's probably going to be my angle for this first one. Obviously, using a Swiftmend will empower your next spell if you have Soul of the Forest talented, so it's going to have a nice juiced up Wild Growth. Another thing you can do to kind of, if you are preparing for this properly and really want to like juice up your healing, is you want to make sure you have both your life blooms out on targets that aren't the tank, because the tank's going to be fine during these damage events. And then depending on like the type of damage and like how fast the healing needs to come out, you actually want to have your 1 life bloom on yourself, because if it's on yourself and you have the talent for it, it increases the rate at which your hots are ticking. So 1 life bloom on yourself, another life bloom on a character that's maybe a little weaker. In this group, we've actually got some pretty tanky classes. Paladin obviously has a couple different defensive utility options, plus just tankiness in general. We'll probably actually be looking to use it on the priest. These are all really minute things that are not super specific. It's just kind of super specific to like really min-maxing your healing on a Resto Druid. But anyway, so I'm going to start by getting out a bunch of rejuvenations, which typically isn't a button you really want to be pressing too often when you're healing a Mythic Plus dungeon, but it does add another stack of your mastery, which just juices up your healing even more. So yeah, I think, well, I mean, we'll see if it actually plays out how I'm describing it, but the idea is that get out some rejuves in preparation for the Quaking Totem. And then as soon as the Quaking Totem's down, I'm going to drop my Efflorescence wherever the Quaking Totem is. That way it's, catching the melee who are going to be running over to it. Then popping a Swift Mend into a Wild Growth, which then after that will slam a Flourish to just juice up the healing. So let's see what I do. I go Bear Form and Roar. All right, well that's definitely not what I was just describing. Okay, so here's the rejuvenations. I think I might just be a little slow on this one. Yep, so there's the Swiftman Wild Growth that I talked about. I didn't move the F-Low for this one preemptively, but that'd be ideal. But the other thing too that I didn't consider, but is actually really important to keep track of is this Swiftman that was actually turning us into a Broccoli form. So didn't even necessarily have to send the Flourish on this one. Fortunately these totems are spaced out enough and this dungeon isn't a high enough level that it matters super a lot, as long as you're like thinking about this stuff and being prepared for it. But yeah, either way, as you can see, health bars are, they're moving down, but they're also moving back up pretty quick. So, good job on our DPS for bursting that stuff down super fast. Yeah, so now at this point, I'm kind of just chilling. We're sort of in maintenance mode. Want to get out our maintenance hots, make sure life blooms out, make sure we've got snaring ward out. Realistically, I should probably be just putting life bloom on not the tank for this entire encounter. The tank's going to be just fine. And it's a Death Knight, so they'll be able to heal themselves, okay? Yeah, so then, this is really just rinse and repeat at this point. Going into the next one, we've got Convoke ready. I've got my ward, which I can use to, if I see somebody like doesn't have a defensive being used or whatnot. I don't know why the Warlock just randomly popped a defensive here, but I mean, I guess that's cool. Let's see if we can find an example of maybe some more optimal, like micromanaging defensive usage in this. Okay, so here we go. I'm popping out rejuves again in preparation for Quaking Totem. It's in 3 seconds. Realistically, there I should have been getting my life blooms out. Because, as I mentioned earlier, this is, again, getting a bit into details about Resto Druid healing. The rejuves are out there just simply to get a stack of mastery. Each life bloom that's out actually gives 3 stacks, or like triple the value of your mastery. So it's kind of silly to be applying rejuves instead of life blooms there. So definitely something to be working on. I think, okay, there we go. Good. I did realize, like, yeah, okay, we need to get these life blooms out. Okay, so here comes the Quaking Totem. Yep, there's the F-Flow going down. Now this is just going to go straight into a, oh, okay. I don't know why I decided to do Convoke first, but sure. So then there's the Swift Mend into Wild Growth. So here, let's see, I did actually use the ward on Paladin, which looks like a bit of, I need to move this UI element so I can actually see these defensive usages. I don't know why I decided to hit the Paladin there. Let's maybe just watch it back and see if I could have like, yeah, I think I just decided to use it and it just so happened that he also was the one to actually use a defensive. I can see here, right? Like we have defenses on the Warlock, on the Priest. I don't know, whatever. This is all just kind of like, it's pugs, so who can really say? Okay, Priest actually wound up using Desperate Prayer. That's good, I guess. Yeah, so anyway, there's definitely a lot here that I could have done better. But the point I wanted to make, which I'll just reiterate, is the main damage event of this encounter is Quaking Totem. Happens every 20, 30 seconds or so. And as long as you are, if you're obviously playing a healer where proactive preparation for healing is important, make sure you're doing that. That way, when the damage event does connect, you know exactly what you're doing. We're dropping F-Flow, we're casting Swiftman, we're casting Regrowth, we're slamming Flourish. And that's really all there is to it. After that, it's just kind of like maintenance, like, maybe pop some Regrowths on people. I threw out a couple of my trees. As you can see, I got this ticking down here. There's 2 trees out that are counting down, doing a bunch more healing. So yeah, easy peasy. We won't really talk too much about the next boss that we did. There's nothing super scary about this boss. I guess maybe I can just point out the fact that there are some single targeted abilities where if you have the Mythic Plus Weak Aura, that kind of like puts these icons over people's unit frames when they're being targeted by things. I think this is where I actually realized that and decided to use an Iron Bark to just save them some damage. So that's one thing you can do on this boss in particular, and just in general, like if you have encounters where there's single target things that can be helped. Again, there's not a whole lot going on with this boss, so we'll kind of just skip over it. Just keep out your maintenance stuff as a Resto Druid and help with damage where you can, but don't stress about it too much. Okay, so the next boss is this Talandris guy. So the two important healing checks for this encounter are there's an AoE knockback, which it does a ton of non-lethal at this level damage. I will say, so non-lethal damage at this level, which means you don't necessarily need to prep with defenses or anything. If you are, for whatever reason, healing at a level where it is lethal damage, AFL, you're probably not looking to whatever I have to say to help you, but just for the sake of argument, if you're getting that level, you need to be coordinating ahead of time about how you're going to survive those things. So that's not on you as a pug healer to figure out. That's on your team to coordinate ahead of time. So non-lethal damage, which means, it can be scary to see non-lethal damage, right? Because I'll let this play while I talk. It's, big chunks of health is gone, but as long as you realize it's non-lethal, like, your HOTS will heal things back up. So it's this charge stomp that's about to come out, and we'll see the damage event. It gets its crushing stomp. So there you go. Bunch of damage coming out, but, we have our Swift Mend into Wild Growth. It'll heal it back up in no time. So the other part of the fight is these earthen shards, which is actually a bleed. So if you have any dwarves, looks like we have one dwarf on the tank, which kind of useless for this particular encounter, but that's okay. Or an evoker with the bleed dispel, or a paladin with blessing of protection, which I don't remember if he actually used blessing of protection at all during this fight, but that's neither here nor there. We can heal through it just fine. So knowing, and this is just a big single target nuke, right? So you need to be thinking about how you're going to heal that. As a druid, it's like, all right, just kind of, have life bloom, slam heals into them. I don't know. There's not a whole lot to it. Using your own personal defensives if it gets targeted on you. So like, Mark Skin, if it gets targeted on you, is good. And then, just basically rotating through the external defensives that we have. So I'm running the Ward Trinket, which is a big shield. And then, which you can see is on cooldown here for 14 seconds. And then Iron Bark, which I believe I used on the Priest for the first damage instance. And then, you can see I've got these defensive tracks. So the Paladin did actually realize, okay, I got targeted by this, so I'm going to use my damage absorption shield. So I'm like, all right, he's chilling. I'm still going to focus in, because truly, this is the only thing that matters as a healer during this fight, as long as you're, healing up the non-lethal damage. And then the only other thing to watch out for is the overlap between these two things, right? So we've got Crushing Stomp coming up in another 1.5 seconds, while the Paladin still has this for another 6 seconds. Given the current status, he's got 8 seconds left on his damage absorb shield. That's definitely going to get absorbed. But he's also a paladin, so he'll be chilling. We got lots of hots up, so it's all good. And then for this Crushing Storm, again, we've got our Swift Mend into Wild Growth, which at some point I think I slam a flourish on it, just to heal up faster. There's really no need for it at this level, but there you go. That's how you heal that damage pattern. Let's go ahead and look at the next boss. Another maniacal behavior from our tank, just pulling like crazy. I don't need to get into that right now. Well, actually, let's look at this guy, because even though this is a fortified week, this mini boss is still a pretty big deal. So there's actually two things going on in this pull. Number one, you have the I think it's like Stone Rain or Stone Volley or something from the Earth Borders, I believe, which is a big channeled AoE damage on the group. It's like a big volley. And then I think it's Earthquake is it's Hail of Stone. There it is, even right there. And Earthquake is a big AoE damage from the Protector guys. It's basically just a couple different rotating AoE abilities. Hail of Stone can be interrupted. Not interrupted. It can be stopped by stuns, roars, things like that. But the Earthquake, you just have to heal through that. So it's important to know that, like, you know, this mini boss on a fortified week, obviously you treat it like a boss, healing wise. But even with this, you know, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna like plan on my cooldowns, make sure I have stuff for each Earthquake. You can see here I'm channeling Convoke after having used a couple trees. We're straight chilling. So just a quick aside to that. Again, healing these dungeons, it's really all about knowing what damage events are coming, because that's really it. So this guy is a little not as crazy as the first two that we talked about. So there's a couple damage events. There's like a magic dispellable dot that goes out, followed by those red circles that we just saw. Neither do lethal damage at this key level, so it's kind of just a matter of, I don't know, making sure you... I think for this, I'm pretty much just rotating between Swiftmend, Wild Growth, and like Convoke / trees. I don't know. The damage here is not scary, so just as long as you know, apply your hots when it comes out, it's all fine. And then yeah, there's AoE pulsing damage during this phase, but again, it's not like super strong, so kind of just, yeah, keep up your maintenance stuff, and then regrowth as needed, and that should be pretty much more than enough to keep people up as long as you're using your Swiftmend Wild Growths on cooldown. Okay, and then the final boss, and the most hectic for me in this particular run, as you can see by this still frame here, looking at the health bars. Yeah, so we have two important abilities to consider on this boss, being Wing Buffet, and Time Sink. So Wing Buffet, it's a big AoE damage and knockback, very similar to the Charged Stomp on the snake dude. And then Time Sink, which is what puts out these 3 dots that just, yeah, tick for a bunch of damage. So, and they can kind of have nasty overlaps here. As you can see here, we just got a Wing Buffet as the dots are ticking down. So there's a couple things to do to mitigate these. I'll just talk specifically about this encounter specifically. This Time Sink dot is actually a slow as well. So if you have any class that can dispel slows or immune slows, it's very powerful. So some examples of this are Druid Shapeshift removes this dot. Priest Fade, if you have the Translucent Talented, removes it. This priest either does not have it talented or did not know that. Paladin Freedom also gets rid of it. So Uldaman is a fantastic dungeon to run Friend Freedom on if you're a Paladin, because when this goes out, you can just, whenever your freedom's up, just freedom somebody else, and that gets rid of yours and their dot. It's also a magic debuff, so as a healer, you can just dispel one. I took the attitude in this particular encounter to always try to dispel the Warlock, since Paladin has freedom and the Priest has Fade, so in theory they should be taking care of themselves. That's not how this worked out, but that's okay. Which basically just fell on to me to just try to do raw healing. So yeah, the thing here is to watch out for the overlaps. The Wing Buffet does a ton of damage, so again, we're taking the same approach of just making sure we have like our Swiftmend Swiftmend Wild Growths up for that. And then, yeah, topping people up as needed with regrowth. So we'll let this play out while this goes. Yeah, again, I felt like I didn't have a really strong sense of how I wanted to plan on my cooldowns in this fight in particular. So I kind of just relied on kind of raw numbers to get through it, if I'm honest. But yeah, I don't know, just a good lesson in trying to do things better next time. So yeah, that's kind of a quick rundown on how to approach healing Uldaman / dungeons in general. Just I guess as a quick summary once again, know what your powerful healing capabilities are and how to execute them, and know what the big damage events that you are going to be responsible for taking care of are. Everything else is kind of just gravy, I guess. Yeah, so there you go. That's the video. If you liked it, let me know. And if you didn't like it, let me know too. And then we'll try to keep doing some of these. Okay, hope you enjoyed it. Okay, bye.